Once upon a time in the future, everything was super high-tech and advanced. All around, there were these amazing AI devices designed to help people with pretty much everything. AI stands for artificial intelligence, which is like really smart technology created by computers. It's a world where robots can do all kinds of tasks for humans. No matter what you need, these machines make it happen. Now, let's meet our main character, a girl named Rachel. In her super modern house, AI systems kept a close eye on everything, including Rachel's health, ensuring that all was well. After getting the green light from the AI, Rachel got ready for work. When she arrived at the office, we learned that Rachel worked for a company that made these incredible AI machines. She had a great job there. Back at home, her husband was a scientist who focused on plants. Even his plant research was made easier by AI because, in this advanced world, these smart machines helped him grow plants. He had created a beautiful greenhouse with the assistance of AI, filled with all sorts of wonderful plants. He found his newfound freedom, thanks to AI, so he decided to start teaching at a college. However, he wasn't quite used to this advanced world, as he preferred doing things on his own and felt uncomfortable when AI took over his tasks. Meanwhile, Rachel was in a meeting at her office, and she proudly announced that her team had developed a new AI. This AI was designed to learn from people, think, and make decisions. In the future, it would serve as an assistant or advisor, offering guidance to humans, both for good and potentially challenging situations. One of the workers in the meeting was taken aback by this news. They expressed concerns, suggesting that if AI continued to take over all tasks, it might replace humans and lead to rising unemployment. They questioned what people would do if they were no longer needed. In response, a senior member of the team reassured everyone that AI was created to assist, not replace humans. They emphasized that humans would always have their place and that AI was meant to enhance their lives, not take their jobs away. Rachel was on her way to work when her boss asked to speak with her after a meeting. He praised her for her great work over the past 2 years and mentioned a possible promotion. However, he had an unusual question. Do you plan to start a family, like having a baby? Rachel was surprised by this question and didn't understand how it related to her promotion. She replied, "We haven't really thought about that yet." Her boss explained that he was concerned because the company greatly benefited from her work, and he didn't want her taking extended leave once she decided to have a baby. He offered an alternative solution by providing the contact information for an artificial womb center. This center allowed babies to be born artificially, replicating the natural birthing process. Intrigued by this option, Rachel visited the center. She was delighted to learn about this innovative technology, which would enable her to balance her career and her desire to become a mother. This new possibility made her excited about starting a family. Rachel registered her name at the Artificial Womb Center, where these artificial wombs were arranged based on orders from families. The next day, she received a call from the center informing her that an artificial womb had been arranged for her. She was overjoyed because this meant she would soon have a baby. While Rachel's husband was at the college, he picked a fruit from a tree and offered it to the students. Surprisingly, no one wanted to eat it because the fruit had grown naturally, without AI intervention. This incident highlighted how people in their advanced world were so engrossed in AI that they had almost forgotten about nature. Rachel confided in her friend about her decision to use an artificial womb for childbirth. Her friend was thrilled and suggested they celebrate, but Rachel hesitated, explaining that she hadn't yet told her husband. He believed in natural processes and might not approve of this advanced method. However, she decided to consult an AI doctor who appeared as a large eye. At the AI doctor's office, Rachel inquired about the process of using an artificial womb, explaining that her husband preferred natural pregnancy and childbirth. The AI doctor advised Rachel to talk to her husband and make him understand that in this modern era, the concept of natural had evolved, and what truly mattered was the joy of becoming parents. Inspired by this, Rachel decided to have a conversation with her husband about everything. However, she discovered that he was feeling troubled. He shared his concerns about the students not wanting to eat the fruit from the tree, lamenting how people had moved so far from nature. Hearing her husband's sentiments, Rachel decided not to tell him about the artificial womb for now. She realized that he deeply valued natural processes and decided to respect his perspective. The following day, Rachel visited the Artificial Womb Center, where she joined many other women. The head of the center, Linda, explained that they had opened this facility due to a declining birth rate and aimed to assist women in childbirth. She introduced a pod capsule resembling an egg where the baby would grow over 9 months. When it was time for birth, the pod capsule would be given to the parents. Linda encouraged them to connect with the baby by talking, singing, and even attempting to kiss the capsule. Linda continued to explain the process, including how to care for the baby. She mentioned that now, as parents, they could take the baby pod capsule home. The idea was to reassure them that the whole procedure was much like a natural birth, so there was no need to panic. Linda asked Rachel to make a payment to continue the process, but Rachel requested some time to discuss it with her husband. Later, when she got home, she made up her mind to talk to him. She explained her desire to use an artificial womb because she wanted to focus on her career and couldn't have a baby naturally. Her husband, however, felt upset, both because he was against this method and because Rachel had made the decision on her own. Amid their argument, Rachel managed to control her anger and apologize to him. She suggested they meet with one of her friends who had experienced artificial childbirth. They could explore the option further and make a more informed decision together. Her husband agreed to this idea. Rachel and her husband went to her friend's home, where her friend's husband explained how practical it was to carry a baby in an artificial womb, making Rachel's husband feel somewhat uncomfortable with the idea. Later, he shared his concerns with Rachel, expressing his hesitation about making such an important decision in a rush. Rachel suggested her husband consult the AI doctor to gain more insights. He followed her advice and spoke to the AI doctor, but their conversation led to an argument, and he left in frustration. That night, they reflected on how the advanced world heavily relied on AI, making people less active and more dependent. Rachel's husband had a realization and acknowledged that Rachel was making these choices for the betterment of their family. He understood that her happiness in opting for an artificial birth was important, and he finally agreed to the idea. The next day, they met with Linda, the head of the Artificial Womb Center. She mentioned that they could influence the baby's gender, but Rachel insisted that they should let nature decide, and they were fine with either a boy or a girl. As the artificial birth process continued, Rachel and her husband could monitor the progress on a screen, and everything appeared to be going well. They eagerly anticipated welcoming their baby in 9 months, and this filled them with joy. However, as a few weeks passed, Rachel noticed that the baby's growth seemed slower than expected, which made her worried. One night, she had a peculiar dream in which she appeared to be pregnant and delivered an egg instead of a baby. This dream left her feeling puzzled, so she decided to share it with her AI doctor. The AI doctor reassured her that dreams weren't necessarily connected to real-life events and advised her not to dwell on it. After 6 weeks, they received some heartwarming news at the womb center. Their baby's heart was beating. This development filled them with immense happiness and relief. Linda, the center's head, permitted them to bring the pod capsule home to bond with the baby. Upon returning home, Rachel's husband had the chance to see their baby on the screen for the first time. This special moment made him realize that their baby was on the way, and he became overjoyed about becoming a father. Rachel's husband eagerly started bonding with the baby, sharing stories and even bringing the pod capsule with him to his greenhouse. However, Rachel couldn't quite connect with the idea. She feared she might miss out on the emotional experience of a more traditional pregnancy and childbirth. One day, while at the pool, Rachel encountered a pregnant woman who allowed her to feel the baby moving in her belly. This gave Rachel a sense of what it's like to be pregnant. While she felt happy for the pregnant woman, she couldn't help but feel some regret about her own decision. To prepare for their baby's arrival, they went back to the womb center for additional guidance. During their visit, they noticed a group of young kids who were studying but relied on AI robots to do their writing for them. This surprised some parents. One boy in the group mentioned that his nephew was born through an artificial pod but hadn't experienced dreams. Linda, the head of the center, explained that they had placed certain limitations on these babies to prevent them from doing certain things, but those limitations would be removed in the future. Rachel found herself constantly worrying about whether she had made the right decision, and this anxiety began to affect her job. Her productivity, which had once been excellent, started to decline, and her boss received reports suggesting that someone on the team might not be working as efficiently. Meanwhile, Rachel's husband took their baby pod to the college, feeling joyful about this new phase of life. However, his senior informed him that they would need to spend a significant amount of money due to the greenhouse, and as a result, he would have to stop his work. This news left him furious, and he returned home in a state of frustration. Rachel, feeling disconnected from the baby, was concerned and wanted answers. To seek clarity, they decided to consult their AI doctor. When they explained the issue, the AI doctor, lacking an understanding of human emotions, misinterpreted it as a baby health problem and suggested they leave the baby with it for a few days so it could connect with the baby and identify the issue. They realized that the AI doctor couldn't grasp their emotional concerns and didn't hold the answers they were looking for, so they left, dissatisfied. Rachel's husband reassured her, telling her to spend time with the baby pod to develop a connection. So, Rachel decided to tie the pod to her belly and head to the office like that. However, she forgot about the pod in front of her, which led to an embarrassing collision with her colleagues. Her mistake drew disapproving glances from her seniors, making her feel like she had committed a grave error. Eventually, Rachel's senior advised her to leave the pod at home and pointed to a cupboard filled with many pods. These pods belonged to the babies of the company's workers. The senior placed Rachel's pod among them, explaining that mothers needed to keep their babies away during work hours. In this AI-driven office, human emotions held no value, and productivity was the top priority. After a few days, Rachel and her husband had to take the baby pod to the center for a checkup. During this time, Rachel had another dream. In the dream, She held her baby and walked along a sandy shore near the seashore. She felt an overwhelming connection and happiness. When she woke up, she realized that she was gradually developing a connection with the baby and that she might need to seek assistance from nature in the process. Rachel sought solace in her home's greenhouse, surrounded by the soothing scent of trees and nurturing a plant. She even brought a potted plant inside, which brought a sense of tranquility to her husband, who was glad to see her reconnecting with nature. However, on her way to the office, her boss intercepted her and questioned why her work on AI had slowed down. He insinuated that her baby might be the cause or that she was upset because of the baby. Rachel felt increasingly uneasy and realized that her boss would never be content, expecting robots in human form to work tirelessly without emotional considerations. Time passed, and their baby reached 8 months of development. Rachel and her husband were eager to take the pod home to spend more time with their baby. But Linda, the head of the womb center, regretfully refused, explaining that they conducted research and collected data from the baby's brain after this stage for their studies. Rachel was shocked and demanded to know how they could proceed with such training without her consent, as she hadn't agreed to it. Linda, with a smile, reminded Rachel that all the terms and conditions were clearly outlined in the contract she had signed. It specified that the center conducted research and that babies would be removed from the pods a few days before the expected due date. This was due to a high demand for the pods from other expectant mothers. Rachel and her husband reluctantly accepted these conditions, even though they didn't want to. Over time, Rachel began to realize that she had fallen into a trap. The promotion she had been offered was a ploy to get her to have a baby through artificial means for research purposes. This would secure funding from the government and other companies. Returning home, they were disheartened, but Rachel's husband was determined to act. He secretly retrieved their baby's pod from the center and brought it home without anyone knowing. They were delighted to have their baby back, but that night, Rachel had a dream in which her baby was born, and she was shopping for her child in a mall. Waking up from her dream, Rachel spoke to her husband, expressing her agreement with his desire to have their baby grow up in a natural environment. They both decided to move to their village house, far from the city, where life was still connected to nature. Before making this significant move, Rachel's husband attempted one last conversation with Linda, offering to pay more if their baby could complete the full 9 months in the pod. However, Linda refused this request. In response, they decided to proceed with their plan to relocate to the village house. The journey to their village home was long but enjoyable, and after several days, they arrived and settled in. As the 9 months came to a close, they observed the baby moving upside down in the pod, filling them with happiness. However, one night, the pod system suddenly shut off. Rachel panicked, but her husband reassured her, explaining that the pod could continue working for 2 more days without power, and the baby would be born soon. The following night, while they were asleep, they heard voices coming from the pod, signaling that it was time for the baby to be born and that the baby would emerge from the pod. However, to complete the process, they needed to input a code they couldn't remember. Rachel grew worried, but her husband used his ingenuity and carefully dismantled the upper part of the pod to retrieve the baby. Their joy knew no bounds as they held their newborn baby. Tears of happiness flowed, and the emotional scene marked the beginning of their parenthood. They had a son, and they were overjoyed. They made a conscious decision to return to a simpler life, free from the trappings of the advanced world. After a few days, Rachel packed the pod and sent it back to the center. With their family now complete, they embraced a life contentedly immersed in the beauty of nature, far from the influence of advanced technology. This marks the end of their extraordinary journey.